If I say the word Genesis and your mind immediately goes to catchy 80s tunes featuring Phil Collins, then congratulations, you have good taste. But today, I'm here to talk about Genesis, the premium automotive brand, which is launching not one, but 3 electric vehicles this month alone. Today, we're focusing on the GV60, which is the first Genesis model built on a dedicated electric vehicle platform. And it shares quite a lot with the Kia EV6 and the Hyundai Ioniq 5. But does the GV60 have an edge over its cousins? We're about to find out, but first, you can skip ahead to any part of this review you like. And don't forget that my full detailed written review is online at the CarsGuide site right now. Since Genesis became a standalone brand a few years ago, it's focused on value for money as a way to entice buyers away from the usual premium European suspects and as a way to lure buyers up from mainstream brands like Kia and Hyundai and Toyota. But just how competitive is the GV60 against its direct rivals? The GV60 is arriving in Australia at the same time as the electrified G80 sedan and a few weeks before the electrified GV70 SUV. The GV60 will be offered in 2 distinct grades, starting with the GV60 all-wheel drive from $103,700 before on-road costs, and topping out with the more potent performance all-wheel drive for $7,000 more at $110,700. Looking at other premium electric SUVs of a similar size, the GV60 undercuts the likes of the BMW iX3, Mercedes-Benz EQC and the slightly larger Audi e-tron. It's a good $30,000 more than a Hyundai Ioniq 5, while the Kia EV6 GT line, which shares a powertrain with the GV60 all-wheel drive, is about $16,000 cheaper. Comparing the specs side by side, the Genesis has more standard gear than its siblings, as it should. Some of the standard features highlights across both grades include a panoramic sunroof, a wireless smartphone charger, soundproof glass for a more hushed ride, 18-way power adjustable driver's seat with a massage function, a 17-speaker Bang & Olufsen sound system, a 12.3-inch multimedia screen and a digital instrument cluster of the same size. And that's just to start. It's packed with so much gear that the only option available is matte paint. Given you get such a generous smattering of standard features, and it's more affordable than the European rivals, the GV60 represents excellent value for money. It's really interesting how each of the models built on the eGMP platform, so the Kia EV6, the Ioniq 5 and the GV60, look so different. They're all roughly the same size, but I think the designers have done a really good job differentiating them based on their respective brand identities. I'm a big fan of the Genesis exterior design, and I must say I think the GV60 does look much better in the metal than some of those early press pics. But I'm not sure it works so well on this shape of car compared to something sleek as beautiful as, say, the GV70 SUV or the G80 sedan. But there's absolutely no denying that this is a very eye-catching car. The GV60 has quite an interesting interior design as well. Now, there's quite a lot going on in here. There are a lot of different materials, a lot of different colours, and a lot of different shapes. Like you've got circular kind of things here for the door handles, a more rectangular rounded off element or two down here, and it's all very busy. It's not necessarily to my taste. So on this launch, we also drove the G80 electrified, and that has a more understated, minimalist, classic approach in the interior. That's probably more my vibe, but I also do understand the appeal of the interior of the GV60. Inside, there's definitely a familiarity about the interior design. Again, the 3 models have their own distinct flavour, but you can definitely pick the resemblance to the Hyundai and the Kia. The twin screens are housed in different materials, but still familiar. The GV60 adopts some Genesis interior design traits like the rounded off elements around the climate controls, the heavy use of brushed chrome and the 2-spoke steering wheel. It also has what Genesis calls a crystal sphere drive selector in the console. When the car is off, it acts as a mood light, but hit the start button and it flips to become the gear selector. It's a cute trick, but it's a little gimmicky. The Genesis GV60 has yet another party trick, and that's the fact that it doesn't have traditional exterior mirrors. Instead, it's got 2 digital cameras that show up on a screen inside the car, very similar to the Audi e-tron. Now, after a couple of days of driving the GV60, I did find it a little bit distracting, and it does take a while to get used to. However, if you're a tech head, you might absolutely love this function. There's a real upright feeling to the interior as well. The driving position is upright, and so is the dash. That's not necessarily a bad thing, it's just very different from a sedan or anything like that. It's a very spacious interior, it's got a very long wheelbase, and there's ample space both in the front and the rear, which we'll get to shortly. There's no shortage of storage options in the GV60 either. Of course, you've got the center console here. It's not particularly deep, but you'll easily fit a bunch of things in here. Mobile device charging right there, two decent sized cup holders. There's a really nifty little box down here. You could fit a whole bunch of things, maybe some shoes, who knows. And then under here, this entire thing acts as a storage compartment. So it goes from the rear to the front, and it's quite secure. You wouldn't be able to see it if you were looking directly into the windows. So I think that's a very, very handy feature. In terms of the bottle storage, you won't get very tall bottles in the doors, but medium-sized bottles are fine, and there's some extra space for other things in there as well. And of course, another neat party trick, it's a drawer glove box. Do you love it? I do. Genesis is focusing on sustainability quite a bit, so a number of the materials in the cabin are actually made from other recyclable materials, which is fantastic to see. These seats are gorgeous in the back as well, obviously not as bucketed as the front, but they're still very comfortable and would be lovely on a road trip. I also quite like the look of them with the perforation, although you can probably get a few crumbs in there. In terms of space, there's next to no tow room, but that's because there's so much functionality in those front seats, it just wouldn't fit. So it kind of makes sense as to why there's no tow room, but there's heaps of knee and leg room, and I've got ample headroom. If I put my head back too far, I'd be starting to scrape the top of the roof, but I'm 6 foot tall, so that's kind of to be expected. This is a 60/40 split fold rear seat, and it has a handy little armrest with a couple of cup holders here. You've got your two USB-C ports there, and again you've got access to this fantastic storage compartment here, which I absolutely love, and a little net to hold things in if you're going fast in boost mode, for example. Not a huge amount of space in the doors for the bottles, similar to up the front, but you'll fit some small ones in there for sure. And what I love is air vents here on the pillars as opposed to down here blowing on your face that way. This is a much better way to stay cool or warm in the rear. Good job, Genesis. The GV60 has a decent sized boot without necessarily being class leading. You don't get a spare wheel, instead you do get a tyre repair kit. There's some underfloor storage, but that is generally reserved for the charging cables. Now, there's 432 litres of space to play with in here, which is about 80 litres less than a BMW iX3 and 50 litres less than the Kia EV6. As the GV60 is a full battery electric vehicle, under the bonnet you won't find an engine, you will find a bunch of electric powertrain bits. It also has a frunk or fruit or front trunk, whatever you want to call it. But it's a little storage space, usually for the charging cables. You could also fit a very large, lovely handbag, some shoes, a bunch of other items in here. The all-wheel drive has a total system output of 234 kilowatts of power and 605 newton meters of torque, while the flagship Performance all-wheel drive pumps out 360 kilowatts and 700 newton meters when in boost mode. That latter figure is enough to propel it from 0 to 100 kilometers an hour in 4 seconds. And that's about a second quicker than the Kia EV6 GT line all-wheel drive. Both grades come with adjustable regenerative braking. Both GV60 model grades come with a 77.4 kilowatt hour lithium-ion battery, but they differ when it comes to driving range and energy consumption. The GV60 all-wheel drive has an official range of 470 kilometres, while the Performance all-wheel drive can be driven for 466 kilometres before needing a top-up. That's slightly more than the BMW iX3 and slightly less than the Kia EV6 GT line all-wheel drive, but quite impressive figures nonetheless. Energy consumption is rated at 18.8 kilowatt hours per 100 kilometres for the all-wheel drive and 19.1 for the Performance. Both variants have charging capacity of 350 kilowatts, and it will take you about 73 minutes to charge from 10 to 80% battery capacity,
using a 50 kilowatt fast charger, or just 18 minutes on a 350 kilowatt ultra rapid charger. Included in the GV60 purchase price is a choice between a 5-year ChargeFox subscription or a home AC charger and installation.
The Genesis GV60 has a very neat party trick. It's got what's known as vehicle-to-load charging, and that basically means it acts as a mobile power source. With this included adapter, you can just plug in a regular household plug and you'll be able to charge a number of things, from power tools to even plugging in a kettle to make yourself a cup of tea on the go. Isn't that cool? I'm currently driving the GV60 Performance all-wheel drive. It is the performance flagship of the range. Now, as if the all-wheel drive version, which is the entry-level version, wasn't quick enough, this thing is properly fast. Like sports car fast. Perhaps unsurprisingly, given it is an electric vehicle and there's no internal combustion engine, the GV60 is very, very quiet. The only real noise I can hear really is the tyres on the road. And Genesis has done a very good job in insulating this cabin to try and keep as much of that out as possible. The steering on the GV60 is heavily weighted. And we've also driven the electrified G80 sedan on this launch, which is a very large electric sedan. And I found the steering in that to be a bit sharper than in the GV60, but it's still pretty direct. In terms of visibility, the GV60 has a split window on the tailgate, so your vision out the back is a little bit compromised. It's also got some very big pillars, the A pillar, the B pillar, and the C pillars. So if you're kind of looking behind you to do a bit of a parking maneuver or something like that, you will have to rely on sensors and cameras because there is a blind spot or two. When it comes to handling, I think the GV60 could be best described as more than capable. It's a tall SUV, so when you corner, you are absolutely going to feel some body roll, and you do. You can still hit a tight bend pretty quickly, but it's not a hot hatch and it's not pretending to be one. The tyres provide enough grip, but in the wet, there is a little bit of slippage. There's something a little bit floaty about the ride of the GV60, and I don't mean that as a criticism, but the suspension's been tuned for dynamic driving. So even in comfort mode, it is a little firm and you will feel some of those corrugations and potholes along the way. Now, there's very little to complain about when it comes to the inline performance of the GV60. However, if you're after an extra little dollop of performance or you want to overtake in a hurry, then on the steering wheel down the bottom, it's got this little boost button that does this.
The GV60 has just been tested by ANCAP and it received a maximum 5-star rating covering both model grades. Comes with a very long list of standard safety gear as well, including an extensive forward collision avoidance assist system that has car, pedestrian and cyclist detection, and an advanced turning and crossing function. It also has a front centre airbag. Check out my written review for all the details on the safety tech in the GV60. Genesis offers a 5-year unlimited kilometre warranty for the GV60, and the high voltage battery is covered for 8 years. The servicing intervals are every 12 months or 15,000 kilometres, whichever comes first, and Genesis is doing servicing a little differently to its rivals. Servicing is complimentary for the first 5 years, meaning you won't pay a cent. Also, depending on where you live, a Genesis representative will come and collect your GV60 for a service, and if it's your first Genesis model, they'll give you a free courtesy vehicle while the car is in the shop. That's all round a very impressive offer.
The Genesis GV60 is designed to grab your attention, and there's absolutely no doubt that it does that very, very well. It's also likely to get the attention of EV buyers thanks to a very generous standard equipment list that's very hard to beat in this segment. The GV60 is fast and it's fun, and while the ride and handling's a bit of a mixed bag, it is a welcome addition to the electric vehicle segment in Australia. For more information on the Genesis GV60, head across to the CarsGuide site for my full review right now.